If you've ever tried to make Chinese takeout lo mein at home and been disappointed in the results, this video is for you. Today we'll discuss the most common mistakes home cooks make and how to fix them. We'll talk about the exact noodles used by most takeout restaurants, we'll go over how to make the most tender stir-fry beef of your life, and I'll reveal to you all the secret lessons I've learned from speaking with dozens of restaurants. By the end of this video, you will be able to make lo mein better than 99% of takeout restaurants. You're not going to need any special equipment. Everything in this video is adapted for the average home cook on a standard burner, and I assure you, this recipe is very low maintenance. Now, the first thing we'll need to address is what kind of noodles to use. Traditionally, takeout style lo mein is made with a type of thick Chinese egg noodle. The most common brand I've seen in takeout kitchens is Twin Marquis lo mein noodles or Twin Marquis cooked noodles. They're essentially the same thing, but the preparation differs slightly. So this is a perfect opportunity to explain the difference between uncooked noodles and oiled or cooked noodles. If you take a closer look at these lo mein noodles, you'll see they're covered in a thin coating of flour. This is because they're uncooked and the flour is added to keep them from clumping together. Depending on the brand and the style of noodles, you'll usually have to boil uncooked noodles for about 3 to 5 minutes before use. Oiled or cooked noodles, on the other hand, are fully cooked, but you'll still need to plunge them into boiling water for about 15 to 20 seconds before stir frying, just to loosen them up. Cooked noodles typically have a shinier appearance because they're coated in oil to keep them from clumping together. But what if you can't find Twin Marquis brand? What you want to look for are Asian-style thick yellow wheat and egg noodles. You'll often find them labeled as pancit, which is the Filipino word for this exact type of noodle. Sometimes they're labeled as chow mein because the terms lo mein and chow mein are often used interchangeably in American Chinese cuisine. I've even seen this style of noodle labeled as fresh spaghetti, bizarrely enough. But at the end of the day, if you can't find any of these, remember, we're just making takeout noodles. It's not rocket surgery. So sometimes it's best to just use whatever's most convenient. I've made tons of stir fries with regular spaghetti, and while it's not exactly the same as Chinese egg noodles, they still turned out great. One of the distinguishing characteristics of Western style takeout lo mein is that it tends to be saucier than most traditional noodle dishes. Ideally, we want the sauce to completely coat the noodles without the liquid pooling at the bottom. So to make the sauce, let's start with 1 tablespoon of cornstarch, 1.5 teaspoons of sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of white pepper, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I use Diamond brand kosher salt for all of my recipes, so you may have to adjust the salt levels if you use something different. Now add 1/4 cup of chicken stock and give it a stir until the cornstarch and spices are completely dissolved. Then add 2 tablespoons of light soy sauce for seasoning, 1 teaspoon of dark soy sauce for color, 1 teaspoon of toasted sesame oil, and 2 tablespoons of oyster sauce. And I've tested every available brand and I always return to Lee Kum Kee Premium Oyster Sauce, the one with the picturesque label of a mother and son harvesting oysters suffering from gigantism in the Chinese countryside. And if you're allergic to shellfish, or if you want a vegetarian or vegan option, they do make several different styles of non-oyster oyster sauce, like this vegan one made with mushrooms, or this vegetarian oyster flavored sauce. Then give everything a stir until it's well combined, and this amount of sauce with this amount of cornstarch thickener should give us enough to coat our noodles without the sauce pooling at the bottom. For the beef, the most commonly used cut in Chinese takeout is flank steak, but skirt steak also works well. No matter what cut you choose, you'll want to follow this basic process. First, you want to identify the grain in the beef. With flank steak, it's particularly noticeable. See these thin lines going down our beef? We want to cut across it to make our slices more tender and less chewy. So let's start by making our first cut down the length of the grain to get our meat into manageable pieces. Then make 1/4-inch slices perpendicular to the grain. And a pro tip, if you're having trouble getting your slices thin enough, just toss the meat in the freezer for about 10 to 15 minutes and it will firm up and make it much easier to deal with. The second thing many Chinese takeout places do to get tender beef is to wash it under cold running water. This process supposedly takes some of the minerally taste out of the meat and allows the marinade to penetrate deeper. And to be completely honest with you, it does make a difference, so I would suggest adding this step to your stir-fry routine. All you'll do is take your beef slices and run them under cold water for about a minute, massaging them the entire time. Then squeeze out the water either with your hands or by pressing it against a colander. The final step in achieving super tender beef is baking soda. If you've ever wondered why your meat at home is never as tender as your local takeout restaurant, the answer is baking soda. It essentially alkalizes the surface of the meat, which makes it harder for protein bands to tighten when exposed to heat. Here I've got 8 ounces of beef slices, so I'll add a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda and massage it into it for about a minute. And you want to be forceful with the meat, enough to really discipline it and show it who's boss. This will ensure we have the most tender stir-fried beef possible. After the baking soda treatment, we'll add a 1/4 teaspoon of cornstarch, a 1/4 teaspoon of sugar, a pinch of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of light soy sauce, half a teaspoon of Shaoxing wine, and half a teaspoon of a neutral oil. Then mix the marinade into the beef well and set it aside for at least 15 minutes or up to overnight. To prepare the noodles, just follow the instructions on the packaging, and after they're cooked, you want to drain and dry them as well as you can, either by spinning them in a salad spinner or by laying them out on a baking sheet and allowing the steam to evaporate. And you always want to toss the cooked noodles with just a bit of oil to prevent them from clumping. When you're ready to make the lo mein, you want to make sure you have everything prepared and ready to go. This dish comes together in a matter of minutes, so it's not really possible to prep as you go. We'll go over all the ingredients as we're making the dish, but it's critical to have everything prepared beforehand. To get started, let's heat our wok over medium-high heat until you see very light wisps of smoke. And if you don't have a wok, just use your largest pan. Then add about a tablespoon of neutral oil and swirl it around until it's lightly shimmering. Then toss in 1 cup of roughly chopped cabbage, a 1/4 cup of thinly sliced onion, and a 1/4 cup of thinly sliced carrot. And what we're looking for here is crisp, tender vegetables. You want there to be a slight crunch to them, so you only want to go about a minute. Then set the vegetables aside and return the wok to medium-high heat. We're gonna cook everything in small batches and then combine it all at the end. One of the biggest mistakes I see home cooks make is just dumping everything in the pan at one time and cooking it all together. Because home burners aren't very powerful, what this does is essentially boil everything and you'll never get that nice charred flavor of restaurant food. Once your wok is back up to heat, add about 2 tablespoons of oil, and once it's hot, let's toss in our marinated beef. Press the beef down in a single layer and leave it alone until it's nicely seared on the first side. Another mistake I see a lot of home cooks make is constantly stirring their meat and not allowing it to brown and develop flavor. So you want to make sure you get some good color on your beef, and when it's done, set it to the side. Put the wok back over medium-high heat and add a bit more oil. Once it's heated, add a tablespoon of minced ginger and a tablespoon of minced garlic, i.e. the best combo since Lennon and McCartney. Saute for about 10 to 15 seconds until they release just a bit of aroma, and immediately add in 16 ounces of your cooked noodles. Gently toss the noodles with the garlic and ginger so they're evenly mixed, and at any point if you notice your noodles burning, turn down the heat a bit. Once the noodles are pliable, toss in the vegetables and the beef and mix everything until it's well combined. Then make a space in your pan and add 1 tablespoon of Shaoxing wine directly to the rim of the wok and not on top of the noodles. This is going to add just a bit of acidity and brightness to the dish and will help bring the other flavors to the forefront. Once the rice wine is mixed in with the noodles, push them to the side again and make a space in the wok. Stir your sauce mixture from earlier to make sure the cornstarch hasn't settled in the bottom, and add it directly to the pan and not on top of the noodles. Before stirring it into the noodles, allow the sauce to bubble for about 10 to 20 seconds to get that cornstarch to start thickening it. You'll see the edges of the sauce start to bubble and caramelize. Then kill the heat and immediately stir your noodles into it. And be gentle. Broken noodles lead to a broken heart. It's bad luck to break up noodles, so just gently toss them until they're all coated in the thickened sauce. Then toss in 3 to 4 scallions cut into 1-inch sections and half a cup of bean sprouts. Adding these right at the end will give us a bit of that fresh, earthy vegetable crunchiness. Conversely, you could saute these with the vegetables in the previous step. And I'm telling you, this is a better lo mein than you can get at almost any takeout joint, and it's a fraction of the cost per serving. So let's give it a try and see how we did. Quickly, before our taste test, I just want to say, I know this dish is called chow mein on the West Coast and lo mein on the East Coast. And at the risk of igniting yet another East Coast-West Coast rivalry, I just want to say, call it whatever you want. It's just stir-fried noodles in a sweet and savory sauce. It's a foundational dish of American Chinese cuisine. And instead of arguing nomenclature, can't we all just get along and enjoy it with our friends and family? But that's just my opinion. All right, back to the taste test. The main problem I have with Western-style takeout lo mein is that it's almost always either too oily or too soupy. It's like drowning in sauce. And I think we've made a version that solves both of these issues and is better than most takeout restaurants. And I want to give you one last tip. This is how you can make lo mein with ingredients that should be available at any Western grocery store. You'll just replace the Chinese egg noodles with regular spaghetti, and in the sauce, use hoisin instead of oyster because it seems to be more widely available. Use whatever soy sauce you can find, and use sherry cooking wine in lieu of Shaoxing Redemption, and then proceed as normal. And you can even do this in a cast iron skillet like this if you don't have a wok. Just make sure you work in really small batches for everything. And this makes a totally passable lo mein. To be completely honest, it's just as good as most takeout restaurants I've tried. And if you want to learn the secrets behind Chinese takeout style fried rice, be sure to check out this video. Thanks for watching. See you lo maniacs next time.